Hello and welcome to Live from FSS. I'm Scott Wolfson, your host and the owner of Florida Sun Studios. Live from FSS is a weekly show that we broadcast right here on the internet on Facebook every Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern. Live from FSS is a professional platform that we extend to our guests, studio guests who have been here and others who have aspirations of hosting their own show, promoting their brand and company, and getting their message out there. The show includes useful tips and techniques that you can use in your own show. We take you behind the scenes in our productions, and we interview a variety of industry experts on a variety of topics. We've got an exciting show for you today. If you were watching the pre-show, you saw a split screen between myself and Spotlight Media Bookings' Cheryl Davis Parker, who is a local publicist in South Florida, and we're gonna delve into the topic of getting your clients onto earned media on the national network news circuit. And before we get to Cheryl, I just want to tell you a little bit about Florida Sun Studios and the Live from FSS platform. Florida Sun Studios, or FSS as we're commonly known in the industry, is an independent studio located in beautiful downtown Fort Lauderdale, near the airport, the seaport, the major highways, the local downtown businesses, and just miles from Fort Lauderdale's sunny beaches. FSS services all the major news and sports networks, everyone from Fox News, CNN, ESPN, MSNBC, CNBC, ABC, CBS, NBC, and basically every other acronym that brings you news. We're also a full-service video production company performing the following services: commercial videos, corporate videos, live internet shows, now offering YouTube Live, Facebook Live, and Periscope Live shows. And now, without any further ado, I want to welcome this week's guest. Very honored to have Cheryl Davis Parker, who is live with us via Skype of Spotlight Media Booking. Cheryl, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Scott.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. And we're glad to have you via Skype in beautiful North Miami Beach, Florida.
Well, I wish I could be there with you in studio. I've been there. It's an amazing, amazing studio that I love to send my guests to. But today, like every other day, is a big breaking news day, and I have a lot on my plate work-wise. So I'm just happy that I can do this via Skype with you.
Well, we appreciate you carving time out of your busy schedule to join us. And by all means, we have the capabilities, as you mentioned, to either have a guest on set, one of our smaller studios to do a remote, or to do it via Skype, a professional Skype TX box, which I'll get into later. Cheryl, I want you to introduce yourself to our audience. For those who maybe are not in the media or in the know of the media and that world in which you and I live in, we live, breathe, and eat and sleep all day, I want to tell our audience a little bit about yourself, your background, and your experience.
Sure. Well, I started Spotlight Media Booking about 8 years ago when I moved down here to South Florida. I'm a former news producer. I actually was in DC for 8 years, so just about the same amount of time that I've been down here. And I was working there for CNN International, ABC News, including Good Morning America, and Voice of America as an editorial guest producer, meaning that I was in charge of booking guests for different shows, guest segments, bringing in the best experts for news of the day, preparing all the questions and the pre-interview logistics, car service to get them ready, and basically transitioning over when I moved to South Florida to be able to work with all different types of guest experts and book them on all the major news networks, using my contacts as my friends and former colleagues who are still in the news business to be able to be successful in doing that.
What was the transition like going as a news producer on that side of the fence to now representing clients who want to get earned media and to get in the spotlight, no pun intended, but to get in the spotlight and to get the earned media slots on various network news shows? What was that like?
You know, when I started off, I went back to a lot of the people that I had previously booked. I looked at my Rolodex and I just tried to find the best guests that I thought, maybe we're only doing one network and might want to branch out to do other networks, or maybe had only done some local media, but I knew that they would be ready for national media. So really just kind of making sure that I had one person in each subject area. I do like to focus on hard news, So to have one Republican strategist, one Democratic strategist, one lawyer, one doctor, so that they could get all of the segments, depending on the news cycle, that I could give to them from network news. So I did have to be selective, though. I definitely had a lot of people reach out who wanted to work with me. But in my position, I can't really be offering up to my friends and former colleagues a guest that I don't think is prepared to do live television. It's not for everybody. And, I do media train, and I'm happy to do so, but I can usually tell within the first meeting or with, the first viewership that I've seen of the person already being on TV, if I think that they could be successful in the long run of being on television. So I really think my guest roster has become quality over quantity. It's important to me to represent the best people in their field who not only are an expert in their field and have amazing credentials, but can explain in layman terms on TV how a news story can be explained when other talking heads might just be giving quick talking points that no one understands. That's very important to me, to get those guests who have that viewpoint.
So there is an extensive vetting process. Obviously, the goal is to have clients and to earn a good living, but there is a vetting process. And for you in particular, and other publicists, those guests that you have booked on these shows represent you in Spotlight Media booking. So there is obviously an extensive background check per se, and a lot of work that you have to do on your end before you feel comfortable to pitch these guests and the stories to the networks.
Exactly, and I always tell people, if you're going to only be able to get on the air once, you get that one chance to be able to impress the producer and the host of the show. And, if you're not able to get booked again, it's really a long ball game. So you don't want to just get that one interview and be done. You want to be able to prolong it and make sure that once your topic area is in the news, that I'm proactively pitching you, and my producer friends are reaching out saying, hey, he was great the last time he was on, or, we really want to have her on again. She did such a great job. So to me, that's really important to see the longevity there and know, nobody's perfect, not even Wolf Blitzer. Like, you constantly have to work on your on-air presence, and be up on the news and be up on your field. But if you have that confidence and you have that way of being able to express yourself on live TV, it just makes more sense to work with the people that I know will be booked again and again.
Interesting. And if you're just joining us right now, this is Live from FSS. I'm Scott Wolfson, your host, and then the owner of Florida Sun Studios, and I'm honored to have Cheryl Parker on set, not on set, on Skype with me via Skype from Spotlight Media Booking. And today's topic is all about getting earned media and how does one get earned media and get the attention of network news stations like Fox News, CNN, MSNBC, CNBC. How does one actually get onto news or get the interest of news producers to be booked as an expert in your field, whether you're a physician, an attorney, a business person, a realtor? Want to give a special shout out to some of our fans here. George Tremente over at MSNBC headquarters in New York, to a fan of Cheryl's, Tolly. Ben Gonzalez, an old colleague of mine at CNN, also an old colleague of Cheryl's as well. Lisa Delmonico of Advanced Prompting Systems, and John Paluzzi, a good friend of mine from Full Circle Productions over on the West Coast in beautiful Naples, Florida. We want to encourage you to join the conversation. Send us your questions and comments, questions you have for Cheryl that's piquing your interest, and you want someone who has the expertise like Cheryl does at Spotlight Media Booking, someone who has the experience as a former news producer who has worked for various networks, among them Good Morning America, CNN, NBC, MSNBC, a whole host of NFL Network. And Cheryl and I will do the best to answer your questions during the broadcast, and if we don't get to you now, we'll answer afterward. The broadcast will also re-air on Facebook, and it'll also be reposted, the edited version, on our Florida Sun Studios blog, and you can visit floridasunstudios.com for more information on the Live from FSS platform and how you could book the studio for your next production to go live from FSS. Cheryl, back with Cheryl here. Cheryl, you still there? Oh, there you are. Okay. Cheryl, let me ask you, what separates your company, Spotlight Media Booking, from the competition?
Sure. Well, I think as a former news producer, I was in the chair. I was doing the job that I'm reaching out to now to the people who are booking my guests. So I know what types of guests they're looking for. I know what their deadlines are. I know the decision makers at the networks who are going to be able to give me that yes or no answer as to whether or not they can book my guests. So I don't like to waste my clients' time. They're very busy people. They're working hard every single day, and I want to be able to get them the best segment and be able to give them that lead time, that advanced amount of time, so we can work on the talking points. So I think it's just my hard work ethic and also having those contacts at the news networks who trust me and know that I'm never going to give them a bad guess, that they're always going to be happy with the segment when it's over. I think that kind of puts me, it's just different than maybe a big PR firm who, it's a revolving door in the news business. A lot of my friends that I used to work with at CNN are now at Fox or MSNBC. And I go to New York and DC a lot for work, and I make sure that I keep up with them and I know what kind of guests they're looking for, because that helps me find my clients and know what kinds of guests are bookable. So I think, just having that advantage and having worked in the business really helps me in the day-to-day booking.
Interesting. Now, the average news segment, for those maybe not familiar with the whole live shot scene of having a guest who's either on set or remote, it generally runs 3 to 4 minutes. Not a whole lot of time, really, when you think about it. It's maybe enough to cover one topic or a couple of talking points. How do you prep your clients to prepare them for, first, that balancing act of answering an anchor's question, and then also to try to get their viewpoint, their message across, to give it juice, to give them, I got my point across. How do you prep your client to walk that tight balancing act?
Definitely. Well, I think every type of interview situation has its own prep work. There's so many different kinds, like you said. There's a one-on-one, there's panel interviews where there's other guests who are being interviewed by the anchor. You can be on set, you can be via satellite. So with all of the preparation that comes into that, whether it's interacting with the anchor or having the earbud in your ear and having to listen to the producer in the background while you're trying to speak, it's definitely a multitasking type of job that you need to do when you're on live television. So I basically prep my clients we go over talking points. We want to make sure we're the most up to date with the news because it's always changing so quickly. So I'm constantly making sure that if anything new has been updated before the segment airs, then I'm letting my client know that this is a development. Let's put together some great short sound bites to discuss it because I want them to be prepared for any question that the anchor is going to ask. Really, the thing is, you don't get the questions beforehand. It's live TV. We know the subject area going on, but we don't know exactly what they're going to ask. So if for some reason my client gets asked a question that they don't feel necessarily prepared for, I always say that, you can speak from what you know. So you don't have to answer the question verbatim. You can use some of your talking points that we've prepared and maybe segue a little bit into an area that you feel comfortable with. Because first of all, you never want to lie and say that you know something that you don't. And you also don't want to say, I'm sorry, I can't answer that question, because then why are they having you on the segment? So just like preparing my clients with tools like that they can use and feel comfortable and confident while they're there in the chair. Because like you said, it's only 3 to 5 minutes. It really goes by fast. And I want them to be able to get their point across, and I want them to be able to do it in a way where they're energetic and they're fun to watch, because someone will just turn the channel if you're monotone, if you have a radio voice. So there's so many things. There's appearance, it's the way they look, just making sure they're wearing something that's TV appropriate, and usually the national networks do provide hair and makeup, so that always helps. But I want them to feel confident from the inside out, and I want it to be something fun for them to do. Because if you're not enjoying yourself and you're not having a good time while you're on TV, it will come across. And if you're not being authentic to who you are and what you know, the viewers will be able to see that. And that's not how you make a good guest. A good guest is someone who's prepared, knows what it takes, to be in the chair, be ready to go, and think on their feet. And it does take time and practice, but you can get there and get to a point where you're doing so many interviews that it just comes very naturally to you.
Wow, some really good tips and techniques and advice from a pro who has spent her career on one side of the fence as a news producer, and now as the CEO of her own company, Spotlight Media Booking, getting guests onto TV and promoting. Now, Cheryl, you do more than just, as you mentioned before, you kind of dabbled into it. You do more than just work with the networks and getting earned media for your clients. What are some of the other services that Spotlight Media Booking offers?
I also still freelance produce in South Florida. So if there's breaking news, for example, with the shootings at Fort Lauderdale Airport that happened earlier this year in January, a lot of networks will call me to see if I'm able to go there, and it's what they call field producing. You're out in the field, you're getting guests who were a victim or were able to see, were part of the scene and are able to tell you what happened. So it's very fast, getting things ready for the networks to have a reporter be able to scout the location, and you help the reporter in terms of their coverage. So I definitely provide those types of services. I also provide speaking services. A lot of my clients, they do public speaking as well as live television. It kind of goes hand in hand. So I also help them with that. Also, I've had clients who I've worked with for a few years who then decide that they would like to become a contributor. So basically an on-air contributor is when you're paid by the network to only appear on their station. And what's nice about that is that you'll be on air a lot, and obviously you're also being paid for it, which is great because it does take a lot of time. Even though it's just a 4-minute segment, it takes a lot of prep time. It takes time out of your day to go over your sound bites and to prepare for the interview. And for women to do their hair and get ready, there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes. So when we get to that point, I put together a clip reel for my client. I look at all the best sound bites and interviews that they've had over the year or 2 years. And I go to New York and I meet with the network heads who are in charge of picking those contributors. And it's a really fun process because sometimes, you have bidding wars from the network saying, no, we want him. No, we'll give him this much. It's an interesting process. It's not for everyone, that's for sure. And some people don't even want to go that route because they feel like they'd rather be on all the networks and not just, only available to one network. But if you have a favorite network, if you've been on their shows a lot, from, their morning show to their primetime show, and the networks feel that you're really an asset to them and that you're their go-to expert in that field, then they will let me know that they're considering that person, and that's when we put together a clip reel. It's a 2-minute clip reel. It's great. It's a way to highlight their experience, whether it's the one-on-one interviews or the panel interviews, just to show that they're well versed and they've been doing it a lot. But that is one path that some of my clients take, and another path is really just wanting to be on for specific subject areas. I have some clients that can discuss a lot of different things, and some that really are only on when it's in the news, when it's really front and center in the news because maybe the president is putting forth some policy or something's happening that makes sense for them to be on. But those are the different options that I offer.
So your services are really tailor-made to each particular client. It's not a one-size-fits-all plan for everyone. And as you said, you mentioned before that that heavy vetting process. Maybe some of the networks deem someone newsworthy in terms of being a guest or remote interview, but not necessarily as a paid commentator. And that really, your job is really to kind of weed out the folks and zero in on those folks who want to go not as only a guest contributor, or I should say a guest, a remote guest, but as a paid contributor. They're representing your company, and you're only going to put those folks who you feel are going to do you justice and do the network justice. So I'm sure it's a lot of hair pulling and a lot of background work that we kind of take for granted. We see the guests on TV talking about analysis of terrorism or military affairs or politics, and there's a heavy vetting process that goes on before any of those people actually become paid contributors at the networks.
Definitely. I would say a year, at least a year, if not 2 years, that it takes of every week being on live national television for them to even consider you. But it's a different trajectory for every single guest. And like you said, it's very specific. because if they already have an a legal on-air contributor on their roster, then they're not going to need you. I mean, the contracts could be a year to 2 years, it depends. But the networks know what they need. They have people in charge of looking at, making sure they always have a full roster. And even more these days, I feel like you just do see a lot of these huge panels of these on-air contributors on all of the networks. So they really kind of stack the deck heavy to make sure that they, no matter what kind of news breaks, they have that guest prepared to go.
It's funny you brought that up, because one of the main catalysts or reasons that we started the whole Live from FSS platform and Facebook Live show was to give those guests who come to our studio, who are on CNN and Fox and MSNBC and ESPN and make the rounds, whether they're a guest and they're represented by a top-notch publicist such as yourself, or if they're there on their own, or they're a contributor, or they're down maybe from DC and they happen to be in town and they're booked at our studio. But a lot of guests, and I'm sure you've heard this as well, being in the business as long as you have, like myself, they have aspirations, dreams of becoming the next big star on TV, the next big talk show host or analyst, like Sean Hannity or Brooke Baldwin, well, as an anchor, but or Lawrence O'Donnell on MSNBC, Jose Diaz-Balart, and their aspirations. I got to get my own show. And the chances of getting your own show on a national network level, we're not talking a guest who's booked and represented by a PR person or a contributor who's paid, but getting your own show, being the face of that network, that show, the chances are rather slim to none. I mean, that's just the reality of it. Is it to say that no one could get it? No, there are people who get it. Obviously, there are people who are on network news. You got the Megyn Kellys and you got the Barbara Walters, but very few people out of the entire pool in our field of journalism actually get that opportunity to get onto a primetime show on a major network news cable outlet. So we offer the Live from FSS platform, and what that is, it's what we extend to our guests. They're getting a professional studio, with the professional audio, lighting, cameras, fully soundproof sets, everything, all the bells and whistles that they would get on a network news show. But we give them a realistic opportunity to book the studio. Maybe in the past they've done Comcast commercials or traditional advertising or that sort of thing. But with the skyrocketing interest and only popularity even growing even more with social media, especially Facebook Live and YouTube Live, it gives those folks an affordable yet professional look to their broadcasts. As we're doing right now, we've got my camera, I've got a director switching this show, we've got Cheryl on Skype, and we've got graphics put up, much like you would see on CNN. So if it was Wolf Blitzer, if I was Wolf and I was a little bit more mature, a little older with the beard there, and Cheryl was my guest in North Miami Beach, Florida, the same sort of thing. We've got the graphics, the connectivity. A big thing, and some people have mentioned to me, not to go off topic, they're like, oh, we saw the broadcast, it looked great, but we lost the signal. And something that folks have to understand is that when you're watching and you're involved in live internet shows, part of the equation is the upload and download stream. So we're uploading to Facebook Live, and we are on a very reliable, a 99.9999% reliable circuit, a fiber circuit. We actually have fiber built into our studio. The same circuit that we use for the news live shots, we use for Facebook and YouTube and Periscope. Someone on the other end, though, in order to see the broadcast, in order for it to not maybe stumble or jumble around or lose the connection, have to go back on, they're relying on, generally speaking, their cellular or a Wi-Fi. Here we're using a hard-line Ethernet fiber connection, which is a different ball game. So that sometimes folks don't realize, oh, we lost the broadcast. Well, that's another reason why we rebroadcast it and repurpose it. But another reason why a studio like Florida Sun Studios comes in handy. A lot of folks say, well, I could just take my tablet, or I can go live from my iPhone or my Samsung Galaxy. And I'll say, yes, you can go live from those devices. But if reliability, if durability, and the professional look are what you're looking for, we provide that. We've done all the back-breaking groundwork for you, so you could focus on the content of your show, of being the expert. And it doesn't have to be a live show. It could be a tape show. Now, if we can bring up the split screen with Cheryl, bring her back into the conversation. I don't want to go into a whole pitch about FSS. We want to get back to Cheryl Parker and the Spotlight media booking, because the spotlight's on Cheryl today and giving us actually a behind the scenes look of what it takes to actually vet these guests who go on TV, whether they're remote guests, or they are paid commentators, and the other array of services that Spotlight Media and Cheryl Parker offer their clients. And I want to ask you, Cheryl, you've given a lot of tips and advice in the short time that we've been together so far. What is the best advice that someone's given you that you've taken to heart and you use in your practice day in and day out?
Wow. Well, I mean, in terms of career advice, I mean, at our business, as you know, it's 24/7. The news just never stops. And kind of like the world we live in today. I mean, it doesn't really matter what business you're in. You're always connected. You always have access to the latest story or latest breaking news. So for me, I think the best career advice that I've gotten is just to really stay focused, work hard, and you can accomplish anything. I mean, I just feel like, being in South Florida, I love it down here. I really feel like I've been able to get some great guests and send them to you, Scott. And, I mean, Miami and, DC, New York, LA, all where the major bureaus are. I mean, that's where a lot of the guests come from, unless it's a breaking news story somewhere in the field and they're getting a first responder. But in terms of guest experts, the studios have their bureaus and they have things set up. And down here, there's very small bureaus for the networks. They're only run by 1 or 2 people. And sometimes they're closed and they're not always open. So for me to be able to send my guests to you, knowing that it's going to be a high broadcast quality, make sure that, like you said, that the connection's not lost. You don't ever have to worry about that. It's going to be high quality, broadcast ready for national TV. That gives me peace of mind because, sometimes thinking outside of the DC bubble, I really do try to get on our people from our community, from the local South Florida community. And they'll go to DC and New York a lot for work trips. And then I'm able to book them on set. But if I'm not able to book them on set in terms of, a satellite interview, I definitely always trust FSS. And it's just been a pleasure to be able to work with you over the years and get, a great product at the end that my clients are really happy with.
Likewise, and it's a pleasure working with a pro like yourself, someone who lives in South Florida, specializes in this community, has a Rolodex that's very filled up with not only network, but local people here. And you get a lot of local people booked on network news shows here. Getting back to the whole availability, one of the reasons why we opened up Florida Sun Studios in Fort Lauderdale was to be away from the bureaus, away from the CNN and Foxes, a little bit further away in Fort Lauderdale. Being the only studio in quote-unquote proper Fort Lauderdale gives us that advantage. We knew that Fort Lauderdale was quote-unquote untapped territory, a very much of a hotspot. You got the major airport there, the Fort Lauderdale Hollywood International Airport. You got the courthouses there, a lot of the downtown businesses, the seaport, Port Everglades, the marine industry being the Fort Lauderdale area, South Florida, but Fort Lauderdale in particular, being the biggest part of the marine industry worldwide. We have the boat show every year. People think of Miami too, but Fort Lauderdale's boat show, not dissing Miami, but the Miami one pales in comparison to Fort Lauderdale. It's the marine capital of the world. So much going on here. So much news too in South Florida in general, but especially in Fort Lauderdale. And we're open 24/7, 365. There's no vacation, there's no time off because, it's Christmas or it's Thanksgiving. Our doors are always open 24/7. If that means getting the call at 1 a.m. for a news live shot, or on Thanksgiving Day or Christmas Day, we're here for you. Not only for the networks that provide us a ton of work for the studio guests, but also for individuals who want to book the studio for production. People ask us, well, we can't come during the week and we got to come in the evenings or night. Not a problem. We have 3 studio sets. The first 2, which are flash sets. We have an 80-inch monitor and a 70-inch monitor that we loop DVDs through, and some of the live shots you'll see at Florida Sun Studios are of the loops that we use, the video loops and the stills that we use, or if we provided graphics by a show background and you'll see the locator Fort Lauderdale, chances are if it's from a studio, it's from Florida Sun Studios. We want FSS to be the only studio where our guests and the networks book. And we really take a lot of pride in the studio and giving them an experience. It's one thing to be a 24/7, 365 available studio, but we want to give our guests and the networks an experience. And what do I mean by experience? People who maybe have never done a live shot, who come to FSS for the first time, feel that comfort, feel that sense of being welcome, and it's a home. And I've had people come to me saying, wow, you made me feel comfortable. It was a little bit nerve-wracking thinking I was going to be on TV looking into that camera, and there was going to be hundreds of thousands, if not millions of viewers tuning into that show, but I felt so much at ease. And that's part of our job, is to make the guest and the networks feel at ease, give them that comfort level, whether it's a guest that Cheryl Parker or someone else is booking at our studio, or if it's the network themselves and the big breaking story breaks. And we have recently we had Greta Van Susteren down here. So if a story like Baltimore or Ferguson or any of these stories break out, San Bernardino, if it happens to be in our neck of the woods, like you mentioned with the Fort Lauderdale shooting, we have the capability, the infrastructure to actually broadcast an entire network news show with guests on set, taking in Skype callers like I am with Cheryl right now, the graphics, the whole smorgasbord of a broadcast news quality production. Let me ask you, Cheryl, kind of switching gears for a second. I think I may have touched on it before, but do you have any particular role model or someone that you look up to in the industry, whether it's someone who's on air or off air, that has been a mentor to you and someone that you look up to and take after?
I would definitely say, being a producer, this isn't my forte. I've always been behind the scenes. I really think that the women in my career that I worked with at CNN, who were my supervisors, whether they were in DC or they were somewhere else, have really just been trailblazers. It's hard to be able to a work-life balance is hard, and especially in TV news, since it's so nonstop, and you're constantly working and you're burning both ends. And I think I've just gotten a lot of great advice from them that you can be successful and you can work in this business and still be able to have a very healthy personal life as well as professional life, which is partly why I did start my own business. It really is full, like crazy hours when you're working for the networks. And at the drop of a second, you could be sent somewhere to produce a story, even if it's in the middle of the night, like you said, if you have to do a 1 a.m. live shot, whatever it may be. So I've just been able to create a life for myself, which I feel so blessed, with my business and my personal life, that I can pick and choose who I work with. And, how many, it's one thing, I know my friends and former colleagues, the producers, they'll always give it to me straight, and I'll always be able to, talk to them and help them and be a resource for them. But in terms of the guests and the people who, they're my bosses. I mean, my clients are who I answer to and who I book these segments for, and I want to make sure they're happy. But at the end of the day, the people who are working behind the scenes in TV news, the producers, they're the ones that I'm really serving, because I want to, if they're happy with my guests, then they'll keep booking them, and my guests will be happy that they hired me to put them on TV. So I just think it's all come full circle, and I'm very lucky that, I've been able to work with people like yourself and other people that understand what it is we're doing, make it happen, and make it look pretty, even if it's crazy behind the scenes.
Interesting. I mean, you're really giving us a perspective outside of what people see on the TV tube and just the news that they're watching, of what it takes to actually make it in the news business, for guests to get that earned media coverage. Maybe they need media training from a pro like you. Very interesting stuff. Let me ask you, in your experience, first on the other side of the fence as a news producer, and now as the CEO of your own PR company, Spotlight Media Booking, how have you seen the news business change? And has it been for better or worse? Or, I mean, how have you seen the changes? How do you view it?
I mean, I think I've never been naive to the fact that TV news is a business, okay? There's great journalists who are looking for the truth and wanting to report the latest news. But at the end of the day, the reason the networks exist is for their bottom line, for advertising dollars. So ratings are very important to them. It's always been the case since day one. I think the difference you're seeing now is with every single story is a breaking news story. You see the banner all the time. And as a former network news producer, that does tend to bother me a little bit, because I feel like if all the news is hyped up, then what differentiates one story from another as being real breaking news, or just something that maybe, obviously if it has to do with the president, that is news. That is just inherently news. But I think that it's changed in the way that when I was working in DC and I was working for the networks, breaking news stories would happen once or twice a week. Now you see the banner on TV like 10 times a day. And it's just this feeling of constant, craziness and chaos. And I don't think that necessarily serves the viewers. I understand that it helps with ratings, because if you see that big banner and you're going to say, oh, well, what's the breaking news? I need to stay tuned in to CNN or Fox or MSNBC to see what they're going to talk about. So I get it, and I understand why they do it, but I don't necessarily like it, because I know that it doesn't have to be like that, and that it really is more for ratings than anything else.
Interesting. I mean, it's interesting your perspective on it with breaking news. It almost seems like it's part of a format. You turn on any network and you hear the slogan and the hype up, breaking news, and maybe it's not happening at that moment, but it's breaking news because why? Because the show's starting at 5 o'clock or 6 p.m. So they got to lead in with the breaking news, or what was breaking news maybe a few hours ago. But I want to touch on a subject, not to get political at all, because Florida Sun Studios is apolitical. We're a neutral player in this game. We service all the networks, all the different political parties, whether you're on the left, the right, the middle. That's not our concern. Our concern, or our focus, is to provide a professional platform for anyone and everyone to get their message out there. But Cheryl, I want to ask you, this being an unconventional election year, unconventional to say the least, you had a quote-unquote outsider in Donald Trump winning the presidency, putting aside personal feelings of yay or nay for him. You had Hillary Clinton, who, if she would have won, would have been the first female president of the United States. You had Bernie Sanders, who battled her in the DNC nomination before Clinton captured that. And he was a quote-unquote outsider, even though he's been in politics for 35, 40 years. But the coverage has been predominantly focused on politics, and in particular, President Trump, whether any kind of story that's on the news, any chance that you have of turning on the tube, whether you're turning on Fox News or CNN or MSNBC, it almost seems that every time you turn it on, chances are you could bet the house, the ranch, that it's going to be Trump related. And what does that mean for other stories? The criminal defense attorneys that cover the big criminal trials, or, maybe medical stories. These stories seem to get to be pushed aside. And maybe if there's like a lull in the day where, there's not some controversy or some breaking news or speculation or what have you, or a rally or what have you that involves Trump, maybe they'll get the airtime. How has that impacted or affected your business, and how do you remedy that? How do you actually go around and work within the quote-unquote newsworthiness stories of the news cycle, at the same time servicing your clients?
Definitely. Well, I can say that I've worked with surrogates for all of the campaigns you mentioned during the 2016 election cycle, booking them to speak in their support of their respective candidate. That's every election year. That's how it is. I mean, if there's a new president that's coming in, it's very politically focused. So I do tend to have more guests on my roster that, can speak to that. But I also tell people that there's a show for every area of expertise. So the main networks like MSNBC, CNN, Fox, everything you said is correct. Yes, they're constantly following, politics and what's going on in Trump's world, or what's going on with the U.S. and national security. But there's other networks like HLN, which really they use a lot of lawyers. And for business guests, I book guests on CNBC and Bloomberg, and they're not all politics all the time. So, I think for the major networks, that's definitely has affected my business in terms of working with more politically minded guests. But I still have those other guests that maybe if they used to be on CNN more, now they're on HLN a little more. Or maybe they're even doing CNN International or BBC. or an international outlet. But there's always a format and a show for a certain type of guest. But if the mainstream networks are the ones you want to be on, then you really need to have that area of expertise that's going to lend itself to that political news cycle.
Do you have to carve yourself out as, quote unquote, as someone who's involved in politics? Maybe your field doesn't call for that, but in order to get the notoriety or the attention of the networks in this unpredictable, unorthodox news cycle?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you want to stretch yourself by any means and talk about something that's not in your wheelhouse, but at the same time, you need to be able to relate, what's going on in the world and what the news is covering and what people care about, to be able to be heard. And if those are the networks that you want to be on, then it is important that you're able to entertain at least the idea that every single day there's going to be something new, politically speaking, and with national, like it's just been all national security recently. But the news cycle goes in waves. So even though it's been national security, before that it was healthcare policy, and I have a great healthcare expert. So you just have to realize that maybe your area of expertise is not always going to be in the news, but it will come back around. The news ebbs and flows, and as much as we say it's just focused on one thing, a lot of times stories that are so focused on, 3 or 4 months later, it's almost like they didn't exist. I mean, we just move on so quickly to the next story that sometimes you forget that certain stories were as big of a deal as you remember them being. So I think that's important to keep in mind and just not lose hope and think that your subject area is never going to be covered again, because that's just not true.
That's interesting, because if history's any indicator, if you look at the major news stories over the past several years, whether it was the Malaysian airline disaster, and that's all that was covered, or it was the Concordian ship that capsized, or the cruise ships that had problems, or if it's hurricane season and there's hurricanes. Thankfully, we haven't had to deal with that too much lately. But you're absolutely right. Or the economic economy collapse in 2008. I guess every major story has its place in history, and some of them last a little bit longer, have a little more juice for maybe another week or month or so. But as you said, other stories do eventually get covered. It feels like it's so far out of the minds of the producers and the American public at large from what they're seeing on TV. But everything has its place. Maybe it's sports season, or you're in the World Series, or you're following the NFL, or what have you. The Deflategate story seemed like that's all we saw for weeks and weeks and weeks, and that finally went by the wayside. So it's very interesting. And if you're just joining us just now, this is Live from FSS. I'm Scott Wolfson, your host and the owner of Florida Sun Studios, and I'm honored to have Spotlight Media Bookings' own Cheryl Parker via Skype with me. And today's topic is earned media, behind the scenes of what it takes to get into the media spotlight, no pun intended. Spotlight Media Booking, we're giving a shout out to you and Cheryl. But we want to encourage you to send us your questions and comments. If you're just a little shy about typing on that computer, don't feel so shy. Type in, even if you get to us after the show, and Cheryl and myself will get back to you. A lot of people, they don't know where to start, where to ask. And I think, having someone like you on and giving us that perspective of what it takes and giving us your experiences, almost like a behind the scenes of what a field producer does in the field, pitching stories, getting the groundwork, working those stories, and then now as a CEO of your own company, Spotlight Media Booking, of what it takes to represent your clients, to vet your clients, to get them promoted to the networks. It's fascinating stuff. But want to switch gears for a second. Cheryl, I think a lot of people will be fascinated to learn about your interest and your involvement with different charitable organizations. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. Well, I've always been involved with charities, whether I was living in DC or I'm originally from Philadelphia. But being in South Florida, ever since I moved here almost 8 years ago, I've really always tried to be able to raise money for causes that are close to my heart. I grew up with a dear friend who has cystic fibrosis, and there's many events in South Florida catering to that, raising money for that community that I've been involved with. I'm also actually the president of the South Florida American University Alumni Chapter, so I do a lot of events for that school. It's my alma mater, and I really, actually in our business, there's a lot of working producers, reporters, anchors who graduated from American. So I'm always happy to help give back and be able to meet prospective students and just let them know what my career path has been since graduating from American. Also, I'm involved a lot with my Temple Sinai. It's where my son goes to school, and I work with putting on their events, their Shabbat, see you at Shabbat events. But I definitely think it's important to get out there and to do whatever you can in your free time, and to take your family with you and be able to share that experience, because sometimes the news really does make us feel so helpless. A lot of the news is bad news. I mean, it's really, unfortunately, it can be depressing. There's not always those great hero stories, which is why I think CNN put together that whole CNN Heroes to hear stories about regular people doing extraordinary things for others. And I think it's a way that can keep you grounded and make you realize that you can actually affect change and do things in your community and meet people who you might not have interacted with before, and just realize that the news does affect us, but you need to sometimes break out of that bubble and really just be a part of your community and helping.
It's interesting because we sort of get lost, I know, for better or worse, because we're so dedicated to our jobs. You as a PR person, publicist, and myself as a studio owner, we get so entrenched in the news that it's good to think, and you brought some perspective to life in general, that there are other things besides news. News is important, and we have to follow the news and stay up to date on all the current events and the happenings in our community. But to be involved in different things as you are, it says a lot about the character of your person and the type of person, not only company, but the person that your clients are hiring when they contract with you. And it says a lot about the type of person and where your heart is with these different causes you do. And I think that's interesting for the viewers to understand, because a lot of people just have, as you said, a negative view of news, or so depressed by it, and you're giving it to us straight. Yes, news, a lot of the news is depressing. Unfortunate, but that's the reality of it. But there are positive things going on. As you said, you make a difference with the different charitable organizations you work with, and the different organizations, like with your son's temple, the temple you belong to, and you make a difference in your community. And I think that helps, quote unquote, put you in the spotlight of your pool of potential clients and current clients. A couple of final thoughts. And I really appreciate you joining us today. I know you're very busy, and you were able to carve out time out of your busy schedule to join us via Skype in beautiful North Miami Beach, Florida. Wanted to ask you, what final piece of advice do you have for folks who are on the brink, on the edge, thinking about, lending their expertise, whether they're a physician, an attorney, a realtor, a business person, a politician, and they need someone like you to hold their hand or get them over that next hump, to that next level? What advice do you have to those folks who want to get in and break into the earned media world of network news?
I think they really need to have a goal in mind. I mean, that's the first thing I ask when I speak to someone for the first time is, well, what's your end goal? I mean, what do you see as successful? Because to each person, it's going to be different. Like I said before, someone might find success in being a paid on-air contributor, and then I can let them know what it takes to get to that goal. Or someone really might just want to increase their clientele and their business and be able to post the clips that we get for them on their website, so they're seen as an expert in their field. Because being on TV, like you said, you reach millions of people. So to be able to increase your brand awareness and your business, that's a lot. A lot of the clients I get, that's really what they're hoping to do. Some people want to host their own show, and like you said, it is very difficult to get that. But it's not unattainable. I mean, there's ways you can work towards attaining that. So I think just knowing your goal, realizing that, it does sometimes I can book someone the first week they start with me because the news cycle makes sense for their area of expertise. But sometimes it does take a couple of weeks. And, I tell people not to get frustrated, that what I'm doing behind the scenes is I'm putting you in the booker's Rolodexes. I'm familiarizing them with who you are. So when the story comes up that makes sense for you to be on, they're going to be calling me, and you're going to be ready to go because I've been working with you and media training you. And when that time comes, that's when you've really got to get out there, be in the spotlight, and perform. So just stay with it, be confident, and know what your end goal is.
Cheryl, some great advice for anyone looking to break into the national media scene or any kind of media, even if it's social media or just getting their name out there, their brand out there. As you said, brand awareness is a big thing. It's not just a term that we just use sparingly. It's about having that brand. Spotlight Media, Booking, FSS, Fox News, CNN, we all have our own brand, and the way that the viewers or our audiences identify with those brands. But really good tips, techniques, and advice that we got firsthand from someone who has spent her career in news and now is president of her own PR company. Cheryl, I can't thank you enough for, again, making time for us and coming on the show via Skype. We would love to have you back, and we hope you have a great day. Thank you so much, Cheryl, for joining us.
Thank you so much, Scott. I hope to see you soon. Thank you.
And we want to thank everyone for joining us today and live from FSS. Our show is broadcast every Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern right here on Facebook. We want you to join the conversation. If you have some questions or comments you'd like to make about the broadcast, go to the Florida Sun Studios Facebook page. Send us your questions and comments. You can also visit floridasunstudios.com to learn a little bit more about the studio and the different services we have to offer. We don't just service the network news stations like Fox News and CNN and MSNBC. We service the South Florida community at large for video production. The studio I'm in now is our large green screen set. It's a full 3-camera production that we have run by a camera switcher. Those graphics you see on the screen, I've got a technical director who's switching my show right now, and we could put up different graphics, different backgrounds. So there's a lot we could do here at Florida Sun Studios, whether it's live or tape productions. We're here for you. We're here 24/7, 365, servicing our news clients and the community at large. Want to thank you all. Join us next Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern on the Facebook page, Florida Sun Studios, as we go live from FSS.